My last lesson is going to be on labor and delivery. Basically at 9 months, you're ready to give birth, and so you're going to see a drop in estrogen and a drop in progesterone. Okay, which means you can no longer maintain your endometrium. There are 3 stages to labor and delivery. There's labor, there's delivery, and then there's the afterbirth. And that's just the birth of the placenta. Okay, so labor starts when you are 9 months, you have a sudden drop in estrogen and progesterone, and then oxytocin is released, and that's released from your posterior pituitary that targets your uterus and causes the uterus to contract. That makes the baby's head push against cervix. So basically, like, baby has to be head first, okay? Baby has to be head first. Here's the cervix, right? So there's the baby. And this is the uterus that is, like, surrounding the baby, like that. And what's happening is the uterus is pushing against the baby, and the baby's head is pushing down against the cervix. And that just makes the cervix widen. So it gets bigger, the cervix gets bigger. And that cervix widening or getting bigger actually triggers a positive feedback where you're going to release even more oxytocin. So this is one case of positive feedback where usually when you have too much of something, you shut it down, but this is how you have to get the baby out, right? So the more the baby's head pushes against the cervix, the more oxytocin you're going to release. The more oxytocin you release, the more the uterus is going to contract and push down against the baby even more, widen the cervix. Cervix has to be about 11 centimeters, meaning that you guys are ready to give birth at that point in time. And that's how labor happens, right? Now, after labor is the actual delivery of the baby, where the baby is coming out of the, like, here is the vagina. And you can see, like, it has to stretch to accommodate the baby's head. So now you get the actual birth of the baby through the vagina, which is why it's also called the birth canal. So now here's the baby, right? That's born. And remember that the baby is connected by the umbilical cord to this placenta. So here's the placenta, right? That sort of like wraps itself around that, you know. And like sometimes when a woman gets into labor, she gets like her water breaks. And when we say her water breaks, we're talking about like this amniotic fluid comes out, right? And so here's the placenta that the baby is attached to through the umbilical cord, which is made up of, remember, the mother's blood and the baby's chorionic villi. And when the baby comes out, that is the delivery of the baby. And then what comes after is the delivery of the placenta. Okay, and then you gotta cut the umbilical cord. So when you cut the umbilical cord, which is right there, you're basically cutting the baby's lifeline to its mother, to getting the nutrients from the mother's blood. And now the baby has to feed, right? And this is when the baby starts breastfeeding or formula feeding because it no longer has a source of nutrient, right? And then we're going to talk about breastfeeding because that's what happens. And so basically what happens is, like, the woman's breast is made up of all these like lobules, and these, like, there's a duct, and like, so this is filled with milk, and then the milk goes through the duct. And when the baby feeds, so imagine like this is the breast, okay? And when the baby feeds on like the nipple, then you're going to have increased the more the baby feeds or the more the baby suckles, you're going to make more of this hormone called prolactin, which is made by the anterior pituitary. And prolactin just basically converts blood to milk. Okay, so basically your blood is like really nutritious, except you don't want any blood cells in that milk. So you remove all the blood cells, you remove the red blood cells and the white blood cells, you remove all of that, and you convert the blood to milk. Okay? So the more the baby feeds, the more prolactin you make, and the more you're going to convert all your blood to milk. So if the baby continues to suckle on the nipple for like even 7 years, you're going to continue to make prolactin. This is a positive feedback loop. Like you could breastfeed your baby forever, right? And the oxytocin also forces milk into the duct. So you get oxytocin forcing milk into the duct, the baby feeds. And so there's 2 hormones involved with breastfeeding, oxytocin and prolactin. Also, when a woman breastfeeds, the oxytocin helps the uterus return to pre-pregnancy size. Okay. A woman makes a lot of milk. She can make up to 2 liters of milk a day. And that's basically all of that for this. I mean, there's not much more to know about that. The only other part that I needed to quickly talk about is contraceptions, which is how to prevent having a baby in the first place. That's like using condoms, which you guys should know. These protect against STIs and baby. But there are other things like vasectomy is a contraception when you cut his vas deferens so the sperm have nowhere to travel. That protects against having a baby, but does not protect against STIs. Okay, guys? And then women can take birth control. That is a form of contraception, and the birth control actually alters her hormones. So what it does is a birth control pill actually produces lots of estrogen and lots of progesterone. That's how a birth control pill works. So if a woman takes it, she's actually inflating the levels of these hormones in her body. This actually decreases FSH in her body, so she doesn't actually produce any eggs or release any eggs. So she basically messes with her hormones, and she basically, by elevating the estrogen and progesterone levels in her body, tricks her body into thinking it's pregnant. They don't make any eggs. You don't release any eggs. And that's how birth control pills work. Those are ways you can prevent pregnancy. A woman can get her tubes tied. A woman can use spermaticide to kill sperm. But none of these protect against STIs. The only thing that protects against STIs, of course, you guys, the biggest thing you can do is practice abstinence, where you just don't do it at all. Then you don't have to worry about pregnancy. You don't have to worry about STIs. You're good. Okay? So those are things that you can do to prevent pregnancy. Anyways, I think that I'm going to end with that. I don't remember anything else. How can you get pregnant if you don't know? Like, okay, how can you get pregnant if you're like struggling to get pregnant? Sometimes they give you pills like FSH that will stimulate you to produce like lots of follicles. And if you produce lots of follicles, that means you have lots of potential babies. And then you can actually fertilize the egg with the sperm in a lab. And what they do is they like take the egg and then they insert a sperm through a like really fine needle, and they insert it like that in a lab. Like, so this is not even occurring in her uterus. Like they take what they do is like they bombard you with FSH, you produce follicles, they remove an egg from the woman. They then fertilize it in the lab with a single sperm that fertilizes the egg nucleus. So imagine this is the egg nucleus. And then they watch, and if it starts to divide and they see some cell divisions occurring, voila, now you have a baby. And then they implant it back. That's called in vitro fertilization. Okay, and I think that's it, guys, and I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.